Well, I lost that little piece of video that I was going to try to stick at the entrance there. But, you know, this is a little bit in terms of learning how to use the Facebook Live, and eventually we'll add Zoom to the process. I'd like to thank you for coming to listen a little bit today. My name is Dr. Jim Weldon, or Yogadhi, and it's the 13th of February here, a very special holiday actually around the world. It's called Shivaratri, and it's a special day of a special night of the self. It's actually the longest night of the year, and in some traditions in the world, people stay up night and they sing and dance all around the world and celebrate it. And the idea is, if you keep your consciousness there all of the time, you'll come in contact with the big mind. Many names for that. We can call that Shiva, the energy. And this state of staying awake actually is one of the qualities of a more enlightened mind. So the purpose of these talks here is to discuss a little bit about some of the works that I've done. This book called The Secret Journey to the Enlightened Mind, which we're coming up onto, it came up onto a 10-year holiday of when I first published this book. And I'm gradually going through different parts of it bit by bit. We did the introduction last week. And now we're going to be talking a little bit about chapter 1, about the mysteries of birth. And you may notice that I've got my NASA hat on. My father was one of the founders in the space industry. And growing up, I watched these missiles take off out of my backyard, and always wanted maybe to become one of those astronauts. I could have done that. And many of my friends I went to school with the children of some of the very, very early astronauts. And if things hadn't interceded life, I guess I possibly would have stepped into that realm, could have potentially become one of those. But my father passed away when I was young, and because of that passing, I did a U-turn to try to understand what was life all about. And I can remember he was a general in the Air Force, very, very brilliant man. He was running the Space Technology Laboratories. This was before it was NASA. It was all military. And the military basically was concerned about nuclear war, and they were spying on the rest of the world. And he ran the computers, very, very early computers that did the telemetry, the trajectories down on the Air Force Base a little south of Cocoa Beach, Florida, where I grew up. And so in memory of him, I kind of wear this to remind me. And one of the funny things that he told me before he passed away, I would have never believed it at the time. He said, Chip, that was my nickname. Many of you that there's a few individuals that were here from my earlier days living in that area. I was Chip because I was the fifth in the family. We had the same name, James Thomas Weldon, and couldn't call me Jim, so I was called Chip. So he said one day, actually he was quite ill at that time, he said, Chip, someday you will do things that I could never imagine. And that's really what some of this is about, is to talk about some of those things you could never imagine. And to try to broaden our understanding in terms of what are the potentialities of life, and specifically what are some of the experiences on this secret journey. We talk about it as a secret journey because we really don't know. I mean, do we pop out of nowhere? Do we go nowhere? Is the few 60, 70, 80 years that we live here everything? Of course, the obvious answer is it's not. But how do you validate that? How do you verify that? So our mind is very much like an ocean. And for most of us, we're living on the surface of the ocean. And every thought that we have bubbles up from the source of consciousness all the way through the different levels of the mind and pop on the surface of the mind. And When that happens, we have a thought. So wherever those thoughts come from is a big mystery. It's as big a mystery, of course, where do we come from? And deep within the mind, there are actually very deep memories within us, very deep memories. And there are barriers that prevent us from accessing that. It's kind of a protective mechanism. And I was thinking about it today. When you go out of your house, there's a door. Why do you have a door? So things don't come in that you don't want, and things that are inside of your house don't go out. And in the same way, there's a barrier between the surface of the mind and these deeper levels of our being that prevent us from having access to really some of these old memories. And there really are memories, in the same way that you remember your day, last week, last month. Farther you go back, it gets a little bit vaguer. There's specific events you can remember in clarity. But if we were able to put you into a superconscious state, which you can access a little bit through prayerful meditation, and you can also access it through some guided, I guess you would call it regressive techniques related to deep hypnosis. Most people can access that. But of course, in my case, when I was growing up, I didn't have any of that knowledge and didn't learn how to access that. But there were things that were coming up, even from the earlier days. And some of these surrounded the mysteries of birth. And it really is possible to access those memories. Not everybody has access to it, of course. And in many cases, it may not be beneficial because, we have enough to do. Your job, your business, your responsibilities, the conflicts that you made, difficulties. If you had all of this other stuff swirling around, it would be too much. I completely understand it. So we're protected. But I was fortunate enough to come into contact with a number of very highly enlightened beings from the time I was quite early. And even the memories that I was having as a child, that's talked a little bit back in this book, in the first few chapters of the book, I was beginning to have access to that. So chapter 1 in The Secret Journey to the Enlightened Mind is called The Mysteries of Birth. And I collected a few poems over the years that I've written. I put those at the beginning of each chapter. So let me reread that poem. And if you want to comment, if you have any questions, you're welcome to do so. And we'll answer those. And as I get more successful, hi, Carla, I guess you decided to join after all. Carla is going to help me to have a little more access to this Zoom technology, which would allow other people to be more effective. I believe you can ask to pin your comments or let people see the comments. Okay, all right. So anyway, you can respond. So the poem that starts this on chapter 1 of The Mysteries of Birth. Who am I? A moment ago, I was free, dancing with the angels. And now I'm your child. Yet I know we've been together many times. Many times we were young, old, and babies. Yet we are all ancient. Many times we have laughed and cried. Many times we have loved. Many times we have touched the stars and the heart of God. So, Carla's getting some food at Whole Foods. So let me read this first experience that I have. And it really didn't come early. It came after many years worth of meditation practice. What actually happens in the same way that you put your awareness on me and information comes through words, you get a sense or a feeling perhaps of what I'm feeling. We are more connected in our hearts than we are in our mind. And if you're able to drop down into the level of pure heart, you will feel connected. And you will actually begin to feel that the space will close, because I'm actually in the deep level of the heart. We're all in the same space. So this is an experience that I wrote coming out of a deep space called Turiya. So there's a space between waking, dreaming, and sleeping where the transcendental consciousness can begin to open up. Insights can come. Events, past, present, future, can come. And this is one of those that came here. Reading for page 1. So I'm like a tiny star radiating out from the center of my being. About me, there are others floating in space, and we are waiting. We are all the same, drops of existence in the sky of radiating life without distinction. Oneness is all there is. A new form, a body, is somewhere nearby. But I am not in it, nor it is the center of my life. Somehow we are connected, although I cannot tell how. I am not thinking, I only know it is there. I am a point in space, but connected to the expanse of space all about me. There's no feeling of big or small, light or heavy, alive or dead. There is nothing to measure myself against it. There is love, and it continues forever. The presence of love is everywhere, and it is manifested as myself. I am attracted to this form, a body. I need, I want, there is hunger, a piercing desire that brings me here. When I feel this need, I see a tiny body swimming in space appear before me, and then it disappears. Again, the hunger comes and the body flashes in my mind. Each time this happens, I feel more connected to the body. Ancient desires are tying us together, but I do not care how or why. There's heat, love, light in that body that draws me to it. An intense sensation of life radiates from it that brings me closer. Like a comet winding a lazy orbit about the sun, I come closer and become more and more connected to the body with each turn. There are no memories. There's nothing of the past or future, or why or where I am going. Just the body moving, vibrating, twisting in space. And when this happens, I'm come closer, like a kite drawn in slowly by an invisible string. Suddenly I'm inside, then outside that form. I come and go in that form. The light, the joy, the pain, the pressure about me increases. The colors grow red, white, blue, hot, and then suddenly I cold. In an instant it is over and I am born. Something is drawn in, a breath, cool and refreshing. The body squirms, then kicks. I am hot, sticky, cool, full of pain, full of pleasure at the same time. I see, feel, taste, and hear so much, all at the same time. My body breathes out and I cry. No, my mind cries, I am not ready. I flee and turn back to the joy and the light that I knew before, fleeing from the body in this experience. But moments later, I am drawn back and squeezed into the body. Look out in the world and faintly wonder what it is. It is the early morning of the day of my return to this world. So, the story of birth, and obviously I'm not saying that this is all how it can happen. This is what I remembered. And in that state, there are 4 basic stages of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and another state, Turiya, the transcendental space. Beyond these, the gap, if you will. And since I was an early child, I would slip in and out of these spaces, often in the early morning, often just before I would wake in the morning, and remember things. Not pleasant things, sometimes unpleasant things. And I know now I was born with some trauma, and it took a number of years avoiding this before it really came to my mind. And, that point, it flashes 40 years later in the book. And 40 years later, I'm in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm walking down the sidewalk through a stream and along the Canyon Boulevard, through a set of vendors there. We had moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I was operating now as a naturopathic doctor. And, as I was walking through the stalls, looking at the wares in every corner, there was an old man selling rugs and incense. And I walked into one particular stall, and I looked into the eyes of the gentleman that was there. And I didn't know at the time he was Tibetan. And suddenly, a tortured wave of love comes through me. And literally, my eyes filled with tears. And as I looked into him, I guess you could say I fell into his soul. And, sometimes time will freeze for you. The present moment is forever. It is eternal. What is now is the body, the mind, the intellect, the ego, the self. But so much of our time we spend, swimming in the past and the future, regretting the past, being anxious about the future. Our mind is filled with so many things. So part of the journey of the secret mind, enlightened mind, is to come back to that simplicity of the child, the tabula rasa that is completely empty of everything, and to have the awakened consciousness of an adult. And if we were able to do that, in the time we've been able to do that, joy well up within us. Immense joy can well up within us. And that joy is the flickering of the joy of the universe, of our big life. And if one begins to connect to that. So when I saw this individual, looked into him, I'm just going to kind of paraphrase some of the things in this first chapter. I want to get out of that stall, but I can't get out. And I literally stumble into him and almost fall to the ground. And within me, some irrational terror rises up in my mind. Trying to get out of the stall, he grabs me and sets me on a chair, and my legs collapse after wave of pain fills on my mind. I tremble head to toe, shaking. Something was familiar. So briefly, this particular individual shares the story of how he was a child. His family was forced to flee Tibet with the Dalai Lama when the Chinese invaded the country. And growing up under those very harsh conditions, he finally immigrated to the United States, but he was not allowed to bring his family with him. And so his family and children were forced to wait in India, 3 years because of the laws to prevent him from coming. And I offered to help him, but I really wanted to get out of there because it was like a wound had opened up within me. And we agreed to talk again, and I departed, but literally a dread mixed with loving friendship filled up my mind for the rest of the day. And so and that night I can't sleep. When you're worried and anxious about something, you don't sleep. I didn't sleep either. In the middle of the night, I got up and wrote a couple poems to him about what I was passing through. Nicholas Bowman. Hi. one of the Bowmans in England. Is that it? Wow. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and I actually write a story about what happened in Tibet and how the whole country was raped by that. And I sent him some of the poems, and, you know, but I didn't want to go to see him. And then several months later, I get invited by a friend of his to a special, I guess, New Year's celebration, Tibetan New Year's celebration. And I don't want to remember. And actually, honestly, even from my earliest days in the childhood, I was having flashbacks, and I would wake up with terror in the middle of the night, shaking. This is like 3, 4, 5 years old. And I would be afraid of, I don't know what, the darkness they were going to get me. So basically, I decided to go back into that space again and be with those feelings and impressions without any attitude. Okay? And I understand that people can say, oh, this is made up, this is not real. Perhaps, but after all of this time and all of the things have been verified over such a long period of time, do your own evaluation, do your own checking this out. I mean, ultimately, you need to discover that. But basically, there is a technology for this talked about in the Yoga Sutras called Sanyama. You can't learn it by going to the books. Most of this advanced stuff needs to be learned from the proper teacher to do that, to do it properly. And so basically, when the consciousness is placed on something, in that simple, innocent state of awareness, things can come from that. And remember, I talked about in the first chapter that we're connected like the internet to these vast fields of consciousness and to the deeper memories within us. And in this particular case, what came was a flashback. And essentially, I saw myself as with dark, tawny skin, wrinkled and lined to the harshness of the wood. I'm wearing a rough-hewn red cloak, red with flecks of gray. And I'm thin, I'm skinny, I'm tough from a lifetime of walking and climbing on the rough mountain passes. I bring my hands to my face and feel a rough beard. I've got one now a little bit. But, you know, imagining being so wrinkly and crackly from many years of that. And I realize then, you know, that I'm in another place. So briefly, I slip back into that awareness. And again, you know, I wonder if this is real or my imagination. The room I'm sitting in appears solid. The air I'm breathing, can't answer your call right now, but check me out online. Okay. So I'm in Colorado, but somehow sublimated, I'm frozen, reliving the past, and this is Tibet. So the dirt floor opens to my hut, and an old woman enters. She bows in humility and approaches me with a gift, a shawl handmade from the fleece of her goats. I accept the guest, feeling her mind and heart. She knows the Chinese are coming soon with their guns and hatred. And I talk to her and I say, I know they are coming, but don't be afraid. They cannot really touch what you are. And I'm completely overwhelmed by the love that I feel for her. She trusts me and has placed her love in my hands, and tears run down my cheeks when I wonder about what am I going to do? So this goes on for a little while, and then as the scenes change, I'm seeing us flee. We're trying to get out, and dozens of cards are trying to head down the walkway. I was trying to get people out, but they weren't going to listen. Everybody wasn't going to listen to me. You know, that the Tibetans did know that there was going to be an invasion, but they thought that because of their practices, they were going to be able to avoid this. And there's always In those present moments, the cause was in the past. So our present situation, circumstances, is because of the past. And those circumstances in the past are because of another past. And we did know that in earlier times there was invasions from those high mountain countries back down into the valleys. There obviously was some karma involved. But we hope that we could avoid that. So we're running, men, women, children are running down the road. The monks are saying, you know, stay calm, because obviously people are going to be trampled. There's a huge feeling of doom, and the marching of troops follow people up the road. You know, over the years, I've discovered a lot about it. I intuited the name, went there and looked at the name of the city. And, you know, this is one of the ways that you can validate your insight. There should be, hopefully, as the clarity becomes greater, very specific things you can validate. Names and places, things that you know that you don't know. You don't know consciousness. But they were invading, and their force was impossible to stop. And the area that I was in was very near the border. And in 1958 or so, 1948, the Chinese basically started their first invasions. So they start to shoot us. So we're running. And people are falling. Blood is flowing. You know, and as I see this in my mind back sitting in Colorado in my little mountain retreat at that time, I wondered if it was a dream. It can't be real. So, you know, my heart is pounding, and I feel, you know, our connection to others ultimately is not as somebody else. It's ultimately really ourself. And ultimately, we feel other people literally as ourselves. And we don't feel the separation. And although we don't know, let's say, their mental feelings, the emotional aspects and qualities are really there. They're available. And you can, it takes tremendous strength for this. It was a problem when I was practicing as a naturopath. Just a little side story. I had people that would come in with symptoms, and sometimes I would go home with their symptoms and they'd go home feeling better. I got over that. But in a very real sense, of course, if something happens to your family, your children, it's like it's happening to you. So we're really connected like that. So, you know, it'll go on. You can read it in the first chapter. You know, I basically end up in prison. They capture me because I was considered a troublemaker. I was helping people get some of their means out of the country, going over the mountain passes. And at the same time, there are many beautiful memories, beautiful faces of children dancing in the breezes, wrinkled faces of the old ones with their warm fur-lined hats, and so many, many things that went by. And I felt the loss of that, and then flashing back to being in the bars. So being imprisoned in those circumstances, for me, fortunately, I had had enough practice that I was able to be in the space that was a little less touched from that at that time. But the fact that many of my friends were also caught and put in that environment, and they weren't going to let us out. It was over. And there were a few apparent holes in my body. Sometimes there seemed to be some marks on my body from that. What do you say? Who knows? So at some point, obviously I passed and I stepped out of that. And just like a dream, in a very real sense, this whole life is like that. A big, long movie with many ups and downs and many challenges. But part of spiritual growth is learning to be in the place where literally you can step out of this body like nothing, just like going out of the house. And you step out and all the sorrow vanishes and you move into a realm, at least I did, of great bliss and happiness. And I realized that I was free. I was always free. And then I rested long. And then sometime later, you know, I came out of meditation. I just went into the depth. And I realized that I died that night. And quickly, very quickly in my case, I was reborn. And I literally have carried this tragedy all my life with this, and I did not know why. I can tell you that even though at that point I had been a teacher of meditation and yoga, you know, had already helped found an ashram in Florida and a university and gotten degrees and all that, because I can tell you I wanted nothing to do with the Buddhists. And in Boulder, there was a big Buddhist university in Europa. I couldn't even hardly enter the door of that place. And I had I didn't know, you know, I suspected it was why. That was why. And I wondered at that time, I didn't know at that time, what did we do to cause the Chinese to descend upon us in this way and move on. And the end of that section on page 10 is a little childhood picture of me as a boy with my sister. So, the mysteries of birth. We all need to come to discover our source. It doesn't need to be as flashy as this. In my particular case, it appears as though I'm, you know, we need to make bridges in our understanding between the wisdom of the world. And in the West, we're a very young culture. Really, our whole Western civilization is, what, you know, a few thousand years. What is that in the scheme of time? I can tell you that there's a lot more to our history in the world. There's a lot more that we do not know. And of course, certainly, we are stuck on this planet to a certain extent, like children waiting to graduate. And that graduation is to come to the presence of the enlightened mind, become more united with the oneness. And it doesn't make any difference at all what you call this. You can say it's the quantum mechanic vacuum state, the source of all matter. You can talk about it in terms of names of divine teachers, because these teachers are the manifestation of that, whatever tradition, and literally whatever tradition, whatever ground, you know. In my early years in my life, I was absolutely a Jesus freak, for sure. I'll get into that later, but at the time I was 13 years old, actually, I had my own little church. So the next chapter, chapter 2, which we'll continue with, and the title of this next chapter is Children Know the Truth. They know, but they don't have the words. They remember in most cases, but they don't have the concepts to explain. And so I'll read the poem at the beginning of chapter 2 here a little bit. You can think about it for next time. If you have the time, I would encourage you to consider picking up a copy. You can buy them as cheap as $1 on Amazon now, and I can send you, you know, the copy if you want. There is a copy here that, let me see if I can enter that. Oh, that's not it. Okay. But anyway, on Amazon all around the world, basically there are sources for this, for the ebook version. I guess this is my version of the audio version, which is not exactly the same as the book, but maybe you'll find it a little bit more entertaining. And so let me read that little poem there, which kind of summarizes the next chapter. Think about it. What is birth? What is death? Aren't they the same? We move from pain to joy. Isn't that birth? And we're doing that all the time. When we move from joy to pain, isn't that death? Aren't we all dying? Don't we all die really every night? What happens when we go to sleep at night? Everything that we are, everything that we know, everything we just kind of goes back in, and in that state of deep sleep, which is a huge mystery, we do unite with the being. And one of the skills, one of the steps is that becomes a conscious state. There really is a state where consciousness is not lost in all of the comings and goings of the mind. And that's, one of the big secrets of the enlightened mind, and hopefully I can help provide some clarity. Each moment we move from one to the other, from pain to happiness, from joy to loss, in an endless cycle. Who remembers them all? From birth to death and death to birth, and the ancient, very ancient memories beyond. So again, thank you. Today is a special day. Navaratri, the longest night. And if you're interested, I'm sure that there are celebrations from my teacher, one of which I consider one of the greatest beings on the planet. Not the only one, obviously. Sri Ravi Shankar and the Art of Living, they're doing great celebrations over there. We did ours a little bit earlier, 2 days back here, but I'm going to be watching some of that and being awake in the night. And what that means is, in the deepest darkness, we are still consciousness. We endure. We always will endure. But it's a lot more fun when you can do it consciously, instead of being driven from circumstances, from difficulty, from problem to problem. Keep your head above. Protect the mind at all cost. And most of it is the skill of letting go. So here, with that experience, and even with all the practices, after 40 years, I had not fully let go. I was still resisting that. So enjoy your day. Enjoy this wonderful holiday wherever you are in the world. And let's take a moment to realize that we are connected with this whole planet. Everything that is, we are connected. We really are. And this little internet connection is going everywhere on this planet. Any person, any of the billions of people on this person could actually pick up their phone and connect to this. That means that this energy is everywhere. So if we expand our consciousness, that is happiness. When consciousness is contracting, that is suffering. So take a moment, you take a deep breath in, and just imagine yourself sitting as this world, or above this world, looking down on this beautiful, unbelievable, tiny dot, blue dot in space, revolving around this loving sun. And the world is full of lessons for you, and it's full of people that absolutely adore you, love you. We all are like those babies in the heart of our hearts. And in that space, there's no question that we belong. There's no question that we're connected. There's no question that we would never be alone. There is nothing that could ever happen to us that can touch that. But not just a belief. That needs to become our experience. That needs to become gradually, through the hard work, our experience. So place yourself above this wonderful planet, and just imagine that from your hand, from your body, from your heart, showers of love are just coming down, sprinkling down everywhere, east, west, north, south. The ability to bless is the first great gift of consciousness. Okay. The ability to bless. And also, need to be careful, also the ability to curse. So be careful with your words. Be as nice as you can be. Go out and do something, some random act of goodness for somebody. Get a chance. Let people go their way. Let them be as they are. Accept them. Let that love and grace shower down on the world. You have that power to raise the world's consciousness. And we are in an unbelievable time in the world. I'm telling you, 2018 is going to be a great year for so many people who are waking up to this reality. Thank you so much, and may the divine in you awaken. We have a word for that. We say Jai Guru Dev. It can be, Jesus loves you. I don't care. God is great. Anything, any words of well-wishing the earth accepts, the hearts of the world accept. Thank you, and have a great day. Namaste.